Today, we will have Nomi facilitating today. And so Nomi Green is a dear friend of mine. She's on the Earthholder Community Caretaking Council. And it's going to be a joy to have her guide us today. Nomi was ordained in 2011 and received the Dharma True Source of Virtue. She is a mindfulness-based psychotherapist who specializes in trauma and is deeply looking with others on how to bring these necessary skills to support our practices of deep looking and resilience in our rapidly changing world. She enjoys hiking, gardening, and being in nature. Nomi lives in the White Shell Water Place of Santa Fe, New Mexico, on the unceded homeland of the Tewa people, where drought is ever present and the Oglala aquifer is declining. Let's come together for some sitting. As we do this, I'd like to just share my screen for a moment. And here we are. So I wanted to share this photo with all of us today. It's a photo that I think many of us recognize, a photo and experience that shifted the relationship of humankind to our precious Mother Earth. And I felt like it would be nice today to maybe do a little bit of traveling, but when we travel, we're going to travel light because without baggage, it's a little bit easier, yeah? So before we travel, let's come home to our breath, to our true homes. Breathing in, coming home, breathing out anything we may be carrying, and Nomi will invite the bell. Dear friends, may we notice ourselves seated, grounded in our sit bones, whether on a cushion, on a chair. We are supported. And growing from our sit bones is our spine, straight, relaxed, a gentle pathway for the breath to travel in and out, deep and slow. Shoulders relaxed, like branches growing out from a spine, creating spaciousness in the heart. And noticing how the breath travels. And as the breath travels, we invite ourselves to move from this place of groundedness and support up through the sky, through the atmosphere, maybe up into space, further still, like that picture. Can you notice around you maybe here in space, looking at the earth. What do you notice? What do you feel? Does the earth look small? Does space feel vast? Our Mother Earth, our precious home. Looking so small from space, like we could reach out and cradle her in our arms, knowing that she has been, is, and always will be cradling us in her arms. Breathing into that pathway of the breath, breathing out spaciousness. And on our next in breath and out breath, we begin to come back down from space, knowing that we've traveled well and together, feeling supported on our cushion, on our seat. So dear friends, thank you so much for sitting together, and I'll pass the mic, so to say, to our sister Nomi.
Hello, friends. Good morning, good afternoon. Let's see, I want to briefly introduce Simona, who is my dear sibling in the Earth Holders. And so many of you may be familiar with her through her emails, and she does so many beautiful things for us. She's the cosmic connector, and I'm so grateful to be doing this together. We actually weren't scheduled to do this, but we're filling in. So you'll have to forgive me in particular because I didn't get a lot of notice to think about what to share today. And I'll do my best. So I've been thinking about the fires. So I had wanted to look up before we began today how many acres have been burned between California, Washington, and Oregon in the western part of the United States. I didn't find that number, but it is a lot. And we are aware of the fires that have been in Africa and the Arctic and Siberia and the Amazon. And our world is on fire, literally speaking. I have family in the East Bay and friends there as well who are calling it an apocalypse. What is happening, it's not unexpected. Probably everyone here would say we knew this was coming. And yet, the reality of what's happening perhaps is more textured, difficult, hard to bear. The word nirvana literally means quenching the fire. That's what that word means. So it's come to take on all kinds of other interpretations. Literally, though, the word means to put out the fire. And so I've been sitting with the juxtaposition of our burning world and how to put out the fires. And I wonder if we could I know we just had this beautiful sit that Simona facilitated. It was very grounding and deep and spacious, and we need that right now. So thank you, Simona. And I wonder, though, if we could just sit with what's happening. The trees, the plants beneath them, the habitats for animals, the birds who have very delicate respiratory systems. And people are wondering where the birds are because they haven't heard birdsong. So if we could just sit with whatever that brings up. For me, it's enormous grief. Might be fear, anger. To just have a moment to experience whatever it feels like underneath it is some kind of grief. It feels enormous energetically on our planet. And if we could also send some compassion to all the beings that are suffering due to these fires. Years ago, I read this book on long distance prayer and how effective it actually is, which is such an interesting thing. So here we are, all over. I'm assuming we have some people from Europe here. We usually do, but I'm just going to say all over the world. And if we combine our energies and send that compassion, it's actually a powerful force to just offer some stability to those that really need it right now. People, animals, plants, and even the minerals. So how do we put out the fires? I'm just going to tell you right now, I do not have the answer. I have a lot more questions today than answers. How do we put out the fires inside us? How do we put out the fires in our world, on our planet? I can say a little about what we're taught. So both the Buddha and our teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai, we call him Thai, have taught us that we have to start with ourselves. That if we are not balanced enough, regulated enough, resourced enough, we will not be able to give anything. And so I want us to just note the importance of that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So what is enough is the question. You know, what is regulated enough? What is balanced enough? I'm not talking about enlightenment or, you know, permanent internal peace. I think the question is what is enough? And I think that's something each of us has to grapple with internally with our own mind of wisdom. Am I balanced enough, resourced enough to offer something? Knowing that our offerings are going to be, you know, a drop in the bucket, and that all of those drops can fill up the bucket. So in the therapy that I work with, we say there are 5 solutions to solve any problem. I'm going to tell you what those solutions are. The first one is, obviously, if you can solve the problem, solve it, right? Who wouldn't solve the problem? I think this problem is bigger than all of us here, but we may contribute our piece of it. Collective, Sangha solving. So if we can't solve the problem, then the next thing we suggest to people is to become emotionally regulated. So for each of us, that's different. How do we become regulated or increase our regulation? For some of us, it's meditation. For me, that is a really important part. For some people, it's being out in nature, getting exercise, playing music, singing. There's so many different ways that people regulate. So it's important to know what helps you regulate your emotional, physiological system so it's balanced enough. So that's our second possible solution. The third one is, if if we can't get regulated, can we figure out at least how to tolerate the distress? So I know myself, as I think of these fires and all the consequences of these fires, I go back and forth between feeling regulated and using things to tolerate, to just feel like I can keep myself balanced enough to get through. It's overwhelming. So tolerating the distress might include some of the same things, but it also might include a slow walking meditation. There are stories of Thai when he was very upset, where he would go outside and walk until he could calm down enough. So slow walking, sometimes making a contribution helps us tolerate the distress. Sometimes noticing all we have helps us. Sometimes, and this is counterintuitive to our practice, but sometimes distraction helps us tolerate the distress. So I don't mean like, a video game binge or something like that, but different people have different things that help distract them. Like some people do a crossword puzzle, or some people read a book, but sometimes distraction is actually warranted. In particular, people with trauma may not feel they can just sit in it. We need to take breaks. And so to skillfully allow ourselves to do that. So that's number 3. Number 4 is to do nothing. We don't recommend doing nothing. And number 5 is to make things worse. We definitely don't recommend making things worse. So those are the 5 possible solutions to solving a problem. And so that might be helpful in your own practice. I know it's helpful in mine. And I also know, coming back to this contribution, that for me, when I know my fire has been quenched enough, I still may have a little bit of flame burning or some embers that could spark, but we're not talking about like utter enlightenment. And this is a place people get confused, because we might interpret the practice to mean I can't do anything until I'm totally together. That is not this practice. That might be some other practice traditions, but that is not this practice. In this practice, we are fully engaged in the world, where we apply our Buddhism and engage in the world. And so it's perpetually micro-moving into quenching as we keep stepping out, little by little, depending on our capacity. It might be something small, like I carry food in my car for people who are on the street with signs saying they're hungry. Might be something tiny, and it might be something a little bit bigger. And for each of us, again, it's coming back to where's the balance, where's the regulation, what's possible for me to do, to not overdo and then become dysregulated, which will then make things worse. So my moral ethical compass asks me to move out into the world as well. And I know this is part of why we practice, why I practice, is to keep myself balanced and even enough to be able to offer something. I feel like it's pretty easy for me to talk about this from my little corner of the world where things are good enough. my causes and conditions currently are good enough. That definitely makes it easier for me to regulate. I have food and shelter, and currently there were fires here. I live in the mountains of New Mexico, and there were some fires here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But currently my conditions are good enough for me to have a little extra to offer. So I just want to emphasize, this is a place some people get frozen. Like, am I going to make a mistake? Am I going to do it wrong? Do I really have something to offer? Is it wise enough? Is it good enough? Is it useful enough? And yes, we're going to make mistakes. I myself have made millions of mistakes. So I actually learned in a retreat with Larry Ward some years ago, Larry and Peggy, to make more mistakes. That actually getting out there and making mistakes is the way to go. That's how we learn, is through making mistakes. And some of us are mistake averse. So that could be part of our practice to work with. So people are calling this an apocalypse. I mean, maybe that word is appropriate for what we're in. We have this pandemic. We have violence prompted by, I won't say who is prompting it, but we have racism, people being killed. We have people doing their best to stand up and say, no more. This needs to stop. We have, at least those of us in the United States, have a country that's in a lot of chaos. And the chaos seems to get more and more every day. So all of these causes and conditions, and then these acres and acres and acres of burning. I have a friend who lives in Oakland who sent me an email saying that at the doctor's office, they were deciding, everyone sitting around at the doctor's office was deciding to use this word apocalypse, talking about, did the word fit? The climate apocalypse. The pandemic itself actually comes from climate issues. Some of you were here last month, and you get to hear me 2 months in a row, which, sorry. There are many wiser voices than me in our community, but I spoke about how COVID came from these wild animal markets where the animals are put in these cages, they're too close to each other. They don't know if it actually came from a pangolin or a bat, if the pangolin's blood got into the bat, but this is part of this climate catastrophe, is animals being put in these unnatural circumstances and too close together and treated cruelly. And so COVID comes from the way we're living in this world. So I was talking to my family who live in the East Bay yesterday, and I texted my niece, who is, I don't know if she's 10 or 11, and asked her how she was doing. And she said, well, the air is really bad, so I can't go to soccer practice, but that's okay. I thought, wow, like this is her normal. And then she said, and the sky isn't orange anymore, but it was cool when it was orange. Which again, it's like, this is normal. This is just normal. Like, wow, there's some cool thing happening. Not, I mean, She knows this is not cool, but an orange sky was a sight to behold in her young mind. And she is sturdy. She is a sturdy girl. My nephew, however, is not so sturdy. He is much more vulnerable. And he is 13. So their whole family is working at home, schooling at home. And my nephew is struggling. I mean, they're all struggling, but he's struggling the most in certain kinds of ways, not being able to go out. And, I just think this is the world we are giving them. I know we've all heard that before. So we had a fire here in New Mexico. And I know there were fires in Colorado. There's some Coloradoans here today. And I have a autoimmune disease in my lungs. And so I couldn't go out for 2 weeks because the air quality was unhealthy. And, really what I thought when the fire began was, it's our turn. I actually saw a map of the whole West, or the whole United States, and the whole Western half, all the states that had fires in them, the whole Western half of the United States has been burning. In California, I know there are Californians here too. In California, you all have started to not have a fire season. It's just any time can be a fire season. And so I love this sutra, the sutra that Vimalakirti speaks. There's this one line in it that is so significant to me personally. I've carried this line as a line of practice for many years. And the line is, I am sick because the whole world is sick. And, I think there's some truth there that more people have autoimmune diseases. There's more sickness in me, in this body that I think of as separate because of the state of the world. And just the other day, I changed it to, I am on fire because the whole world is on fire. We do have fire inside us. It helps us digest and stay warm, keep our temperature at that perfect 98.6 when we're not ill. So to notice the fire in me, I am on fire because the whole world is on fire. And we practice with the truth of impermanence. We know everything changes. It's the only truth is impermanence. The only true thing we can count on is that everything will change. Nothing will stay the same. And there's another sutra I really like, the Sutra on the 8 Realizations of Great Beings. And the second realization of great beings is that everything is impermanent. There's actually a line in that short little section on the second realization that says all political regimes will fail. Maybe some of us feel some hope from that. But the truth is, everything is impermanent. And for us to be wise beings, we have to live in that. So, I know this is a time that calls for enormous flexibility, enormous letting go. And, this is it. This is it. This is what we got. This is it. This is everything. So this is our field of practice. And I guess my question I would love to have you all share in Dharma sharing is, how do we meet this moment? Where do we use getting ourselves regulated, or the small ways we can help, the grief, everything, to meet this moment? So I thank you. I'm going to invite the bell 3 times, and then I'm going to pass it back to Simona to tell us how to organize for Dharma sharing, and then she's going to pass it back to me. So. Thank you for your kind attention. I just want to offer any merit that we've generated today to all beings. May the fruits of our practice benefit all beings and bring peace. And when we think of bringing peace, in particular, may we bring peace to those that are suffering most right now. So thank you all for being here.